They told me I was broken, Clear's throat. My own father looked me in the eyes and called me barren soil, claiming I was medically infertile and utterly worthless to our bloodline. To pay off his gambling debts, he didn't just disown me. He sold me to the vampire sector like a piece of discounted meat. I thought my life was over. I thought I would be drained and discarded before sunrise. But the monster who bought me didn't want to hurt me. He looked at me with hunger, yes, but also worship. And 3 days later, the impossible happened. The girl who was sold as damaged goods was carrying the heir to the most powerful vampire kingdom in the world. And my family, they were about to learn what happens when you sell a king's soulmate. The heavy oak door of the Sterling Manor slammed shut, shaking the dust from the chandeliers. But the noise didn't startle Isla Sterling. At 22 years old, she was used to the noise, the yelling, and the overwhelming scent of gin that followed her stepmother, Margot, like a cheap perfume. "Stop crying, you useless girl," Margot hissed, grabbing Isla's chin with fingers that dug into her jaw. "This is the only kindness we can offer you. A roof over your head costs money, food costs money, and you are a drain." Isla pulled away, her back hitting the cold wall of the hallway. "I can work, Margot. I told you I can get a job at the archives." "Work?" Her father, Arthur Sterling, stepped out of the shadows of his study. He looked older than his 50 years, his face grey and lined with the stress of a man who owed money to dangerous people. "We don't need pocket change, Isla. We need millions, and we need them by midnight." Arthur held up a piece of paper. It was a medical report from the city clinic stamped with the red seal of Dr. Halloway, a man Isla knew her father had bribed. Diagnosis: reproductively barren, hormonal stagnation. Grade 4, infertility. "You are dry soil, Isla," Arthur said, his voice devoid of any paternal warmth. "In a world where vampires pay fortunes for human breeders to sustain their dwindling population, you are technically defective merchandise. But you are pretty, and the night market doesn't always check the medicals closely if the girl is pretty enough." Isla felt the blood drain from her face. "The night market, Dad, please. They kill people there. They buy humans for food, not just breeding." "It's done," Arthur said, turning his back on her to pour a drink. "The handlers are already here." Before Isla could scream, the front door opened. 2 men in dark suits wearing sunglasses despite the gloomy evening stepped inside. They didn't look human. Clear's throat. Their skin was too pale, their movements too fluid. "Is this the lot?" one of them asked, his voice sounding like gravel grinding together. "Isla Sterling," Margot said, shoving Isla forward. "She's healthy, young, just a bit broken inside. Can't produce pups, but she has plenty of blood." Isla trembled, looking at her father one last time, begging silently for him to stop this, to save her. But Arthur Sterling was busy counting the briefcase of cash the second handler had placed on the table. He didn't even look up as his daughter was handcuffed and dragged out into the rainy night. She wasn't a daughter anymore. She was a debt payment. The night market wasn't a street market. It was an underground amphitheater, buried deep beneath the ruins of the old cathedral in the city centre. The air smelled of expensive cologne, old stone, and the metallic tang of fear. Isla was dressed in a thin white silk slip that offered no warmth and left her feeling exposed. She was number 47, the final lot of the night. She stood behind the velvet curtain, listening to the auctioneer's voice booming over the speakers. "Sold to Baron Silas Vane for 3 million credits." Isla flinched. Baron Silas Vane. Everyone knew that name. He was a lichen vampire hybrid, a cruel warlord who ran the Northern Territories. Rumor had it his brides didn't last a week. "Next up," the auctioneer announced, "Lot 47, a human female, pure blood, type O negative, note, certified infertile, sold as a companion or sustenance. Starting bid at 500, zero, the auctioneer boredly stated. 600, a voice called out. 7. The bidding was sluggish. No one wanted a barren human. In this society, vampires cherished fertility above all else, because vampire-human hybrids were the only way their race could evolve. A girl who couldn't bear children was just a walking blood bag. 1 million. A dark, sneering voice cut through the room. Isla froze. It was Baron Silas Vane. He stood up in the front row, a massive figure with a scar running down his cheek. He licked his lips, his eyes undressing her. I need a new toy to break. She looks fragile enough. 1 million going once, the auctioneer said, raising his gavel. Going twice. Isla closed her eyes, tears leaking out. This is it. I'm going to die. 50 million. The silence that followed was absolute. It was so quiet you could hear a heartbeat, specifically Isla's terrified rabbit heart. The entire room turned toward the back of the auditorium. A man was walking down the center aisle. He didn't walk. He glided, the darkness seeming to bend around him. He was tall, wearing a suit that cost more than Isla's entire neighborhood. His hair was black as a raven's wing, and his eyes were a piercing, impossible shade of violet. The king of the night, Lord Caelan Thorne. Even the auctioneer looked terrified. Lord Thorne, 50 million for the defective lot? Caelan didn't look at the auctioneer. He walked straight to the stage, climbed the stairs, and stopped inches from Isla. He towered over her, his scent enveloping her. It smelled like winter rain and cedarwood. It was intoxicating. He reached out a gloved hand and tilted her chin up. He didn't look at her body. He looked straight into her soul. She's not defective, Caelan said, his voice low but carrying to every corner of the silent room. She is priceless. He turned to the auctioneer. Wrap her in my coat. If anyone touches her skin before we leave, I will remove their hands. The drive to Caelan's estate, Crimson Hollow, took 2 hours. It was a fortress of black stone perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean. Isla had curled into the corner of the limousine, clutching the heavy wool coat Caelan had given her. He hadn't spoken a word to her. He just watched her, his violet eyes tracking her every breath. When they arrived, servants rushed to open the doors. They didn't treat her like a slave. They bowed. Take her to the master suite, Caelan ordered a kindly-looking older woman named Martha. Prepare a bath, warm water, rose oil, and get Dr. Eris immediately. Isla found her voice. Am I sick? Caelan stopped in the grand foyer. He turned to her, his expression unreadable, though the cruelty she expected wasn't there. Instead, there was a simmering rage, but it didn't seem directed at her. No, Isla, he said softly, using her name for the first time. Clear's throat. It sounded like a prayer on his lips. You aren't sick. You were sabotaged. An hour later, Isla was clean, dressed in soft velvet pajamas and sitting on the edge of a bed that was larger than her old bedroom. Caelan entered, accompanied by another man who looked like him but wore glasses. Dr. Aris Thorne. The blood work is back, brother, Aris said, handing Caelan a tablet. It's exactly as you smelled. Caelan nodded, his jaw tightening. He walked over to Isla and sat on the chair opposite her. He tried to make himself look smaller, less threatening. Isla, do you know why your family called you infertile? Caelan asked. Because I never had a cycle, she whispered, looking down at her hands. Since I was 16, Dr. Halloway said my womb was withered. Dr. Halloway is a liar and a criminal, Caelan growled. Aris. Tell her. Dr. Aris stepped forward gently. Miss Sterling, your reproductive system is perfectly healthy. In fact, it's hyperactive. You have a rare genetic marker called the sanguis vitae. You are a life-bringer. It's a trait that appears in 1 out of 1 billion humans. You are the most fertile creature on this continent. Isla's mouth fell open. But the no cycles, the diagnosis, poison, Caelan said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. For years, your stepmother and father have been feeding you small doses of wolfsbane and nightshade in your tea or food. It suppressed your hormones and masked your scent. If they hadn't, every vampire in the city would have smelled your potential the moment you turned 18. Isla felt sick. The tea. Every night, Margot insisted on making her a special herbal tea for her nerves. They poisoned me, Isla choked out, tears hot in her eyes. Why? Why sell me as broken if I was worth more as a life-bringer? Because they are fools, Kaelin said, standing up and moving to sit beside her on the bed. He didn't touch her, but his heat radiated toward her. They wanted a quick sale to cover a debt, and they knew if you were discovered as a life-bringer, the Royal Council would have taken you into protection. Your father wouldn't have gotten a penny, so he suppressed you, damaged you, and sold you as trash. Kaelin reached out, his cold thumb brushing Clear's throat, a tear from her cheek. The touch sent a jolt of electricity through Isla's spine that made her toes curl. "But the poison has a half-life of only 24 hours, Kaelin murmured, his eyes darkening, the violet turning almost black. Now that you are here, eating clean food, drinking clean water, your body is waking up, Isla. The suppression is breaking." "What does that mean?" she asked, her breath hitching. Kaelin leaned in close, his fangs slightly extending, not in threat, but in instinct. "It means," he whispered against her ear, "that within 3 days your true scent will emerge, and when it does, you will go into a biological heat that no vampire can resist, least of all me." He pulled back, his eyes burning. "I bought you to save you, Isla. But now I must ask you to trust me, because once the nightshade leaves your blood, you will need a mate, and I intend to be the only man who ever touches you." The detoxification process was not the gentle awakening Isla had imagined. It was a war. For the next 24 hours, Isla's body fought to purge years of accumulated wolfsbane. She lay in the center of the massive king-sized bed, thrashing against silk sheets that were soaked with sweat. Her bones ached as if they were being reshaped, and her skin burned with a fever that no wet cloth could cool. Through the haze of pain, one constant anchored her: Kaelin. The vampire king did not leave her side. He didn't eat. He didn't sleep. He sat on the edge of the mattress, his cold hands acting as the only relief to her burning skin. He changed the cool compresses on her forehead with a tenderness that belied his lethal reputation. "It hurts," Isla whimpered, clutching his wrist. Her nails dug into his skin, but he didn't flinch. "I know, little one," Kaelin murmured, brushing damp hair from her face. "The poison is leaving. It's fighting to stay. But your blood is stronger. You are stronger." By the sunset of the second day, the fever broke. It happened instantly. One moment, Isla was shivering. The next, a wave of clarity washed over her. She sat up, gasping for air, her vision sharper than it had ever been. She could see the dust motes dancing in the moonlight, filtering through the balcony doors. She could hear the heartbeat of a bird nesting in the eaves outside, and she could smell him. The scent hit her like a physical blow. Before, Kaelin had smelled pleasant, like rain and cedar. Now he smelled like raw power, dark chocolate, and something ancient and electrifying that made her mouth water. Kaelin, who had been standing by the window, froze. His back went rigid. He didn't turn around. "Isla," he said, his voice strained, sounding like gravel grinding in a deep cavern. "You need to stay on the bed. Dr. Aris is bringing a suppressant." "Why?" Isla asked, swinging her legs over the side of the bed. She felt weak, but also incredibly alive. A strange heat was pooling low in her stomach, a throbbing ache that demanded attention. "Because—" Kaelin gripped the window frame so hard the wood splintered. "The poison is gone and your true scent, it is filling the room. If I turn around, I cannot promise I will be a gentleman." Isla stood up. She looked at herself in the mirror. Her skin was glowing, the pallor of sickness replaced by a flush of rose. Her eyes, usually a dull brown, now sparkled with flecks of gold. She didn't feel like the broken girl from Stirling Manor anymore. She felt like a queen. She walked toward him, clear as throat. "I don't want a suppressant, Kaelin." He spun around, his violet eyes blown wide, the pupils almost swallowing the iris. His fangs were fully extended, glistening in the dim light. He looked terrifying. He looked beautiful. "You don't know what you are asking," he growled, backing away until he hit the wall. "I am a predator, Isla. You are the most intoxicating thing I have ever sensed in 500 years. If I touch you now, I will mark you. I will claim you. There is no going back." Isla closed the distance. She remembered her father calling her worthless. She remembered the cold indifference of the world. And then she looked at this monster, this king who had spent 2 days wiping sweat from her brow and guarding her sleep. "My family sold me," she whispered, placing her hand flat against his chest, right over his dead, still heart. "They threw me away. You are the only one who saw value in me. If I am to belong to anyone, Kaelin, I choose you." The control snapped. Kaelin let out a low, guttural roar and swept her up into his arms. He didn't carry her to the bed gently. He moved with vampire speed, blurring through the air. When her back hit the mattress, his body was already over hers, heavy and hard. "Mine," he snarled against her neck, inhaling her scent deeply. "You are mine, Isla, forever." The night became a blur of passion that shattered the windows of the bedroom. It wasn't just physical. It was a soul binding. When he finally sank his fangs into the juncture of her neck to mark her, Isla didn't feel pain. She felt a rush of euphoria, a golden thread connecting her mind to his. She could feel his loneliness, his centuries of waiting, and his overwhelming, terrifying love for her. She wasn't a debt payment anymore. She was the queen of the night. The morning sun of the 3rd day didn't burn Kaelin. He was an elder, immune to the sun's lethal touch, though he preferred the shade. He lay awake, watching Isla sleep. Her head rested on his chest, her breathing steady and deep. The bite mark on her neck had already healed into a silver scar, the mark of the Thorn House. He felt a peace he hadn't known since before the Great Wars. But as he stroked her hair, his enhanced hearing picked up something strange. Thump! 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 He frowned. He could hear Isla's heart, strong and rhythmic, but underneath it, faint as a butterfly's wing, was a second sound, rapid, fluttering. Whoosh! Whoosh! Kaelin sat up abruptly, jarring Isla awake. "What?" she gasped, clutching the sheet to her chest. "What's wrong? Are we under attack?" Kaelin looked at her, his face pale with shock. He looked at her stomach, then back to her eyes. "Isla, how do you feel?" "I'm hungry," she admitted, rubbing her eyes. "Starving, actually, and my lower back aches a little." "Why?" Kaelin didn't answer. He pressed the intercom button on the bedside table. "Aris, get in here now. Bring the portable ultrasound." "Ultrasound?" Isla asked, panic rising. "Kaelin, you're scaring me." Dr. Harris burst into the room 30 seconds later, looking disheveled, a medical bag in hand. "What happened? Is she rejecting the bond?" "Listen," Kaelin commanded, pointing at Isla's stomach. Harris froze. He tilted his head, his vampire ears twitching, his jaw dropped. "Impossible." "What is impossible?" Isla shouted, looking between the two brothers. "Tell me." Aris walked over slowly, his movements tentative. He pulled a wand from his bag and waved it over Isla's abdomen. A holographic projection hovered in the air above the bed. There, in the center of the blue light, was a tiny glowing sac, and inside a rapidly dividing cluster of cells that was already forming a shape. "By the ancients," Aris whispered, adjusting his glasses. "She's pregnant. And judging by the cell division rate, the fetus is already at the developmental stage of 8 weeks. Pregnant, Isla breathed, her hands flying to her stomach. But it's been 1 night. How? The sanguis vitae, Aris explained, his voice trembling with scientific excitement, combined with Kaelin's royal blood. Your body isn't just fertile, it's adaptive. It recognized the genetic material and accelerated the process to ensure survival. It's a survival mechanism of the life-bringers. Kaelin looked at Isla, waiting for her reaction. He expected horror. He expected her to scream about things moving too fast. Instead, Isla looked at the hologram and then at Kaelin, tears filling her eyes. "I'm not barren," she sobbed, a smile breaking through her tears. "I'm not dry soil. I created life." Kaelin let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He pulled her into a fierce embrace, burying his face in her neck. "You created a miracle, my love. An heir, a prince or princess of the blood." But the moment of joy was shattered by the harsh ringing of Kaelin's secure phone line. Only 3 people had that number. Kaelin answered, his face hardening instantly. "Speak," he commanded. "My lord!" The voice of his head of security crackled. "We have a problem. The paparazzi are swarming the gates. Someone leaked the medical files from Dr. Holloway's clinic. The old ones calling her infertile, and the new ones from Dr. Aris's lab server showing the pregnancy markers." "Who leaked it?" Kaelin demanded, his voice dropping to absolute zero. "It wasn't a hack, sir. It was a sale. A source inside the clinic sold the info." Kaelin hung up, his eyes glowing red. "What is it?" Isla asked, sensing his shift from lover to killer. "The world knows," Kaelin said, standing up and reaching for his shirt. "They know I bought an infertile girl, and they know that 3 days later she is carrying the royal heir." "Why is that bad?" Isla asked. "Because—" Kaelin turned to the window, looking out at the distant gates where flashes of cameras were already visible. "To the Vampire Council, it looks like a miracle. But to your enemies, to the people who sold you, it looks like they lost the winning lottery ticket." He turned back to her. "Your father is on the news right now, Isla. He's claiming I kidnapped you. He's claiming he didn't know you were a life-bringer and that I stole his beloved daughter to experiment on her." Isla's face went white. "He wants me back." "No." Kaelin buttoned his shirt, his expression grim. "He wants the money he thinks he's owed. He sold you for 3 million. Now that he knows you're carrying a royal heir, you're worth billions, and he's coming to claim custody." The peace of Crimson Hollow was shattered not by weapons, but by the relentless, blinding flash of cameras. From the Master Suite's balcony, Kaelin Thorne looked down at the iron gates of his estate. His hands were gripping the stone railing so hard that spiderweb cracks were spreading through the ancient granite. To a human, the crowd outside would look like a chaotic swarm of reporters and lawyers. To a vampire with Kaelin's enhanced senses, it was a sensory nightmare. He could hear the rapid-fire shutters of 1,000 cameras. He could smell the cheap cologne of the attorneys, the fierce sweat of the security guards, and most pungently, the rotting metallic stench of betrayal radiating from the 3 figures standing at the front of the mob. "They are not leaving," Kaelin said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in Isla's chest as she stood behind him. "If I go down there, Isla, I will not be able to stop myself. I will tear them apart on live television." Isla stepped forward, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind. Her hands rested over his cold, hard abdomen, her cheek pressed against the silk of his shirt. Even through the fabric, she could feel the tension in his muscles. He was a predator, being forced to play by the rules of prey. "You can't kill them, Kaelin," she whispered, though every instinct in her own body wanted to scream. "That's what they want. If you attack unarmed humans, especially my grieving parents, the High Council will declare you a rogue. They'll execute you, and they'll take the baby." The mention of the baby made Kaelin freeze. He turned in her arms, his violet eyes swirling with a mixture of rage and terrified love. He placed a large hand over her stomach. It had only been 3 days, but the hybrid pregnancy was advancing with supernatural speed. There was already a distinct, firm swell beneath her dress, a life that was half human, half king. "I will burn the city to ash before I let them touch you or our son," Kaelin vowed. "We have to be smarter than them," Isla said, finding a strength she didn't know she possessed. She walked over to the large wall-mounted screen in the bedroom and turned on the news feed. The screen flickered to life, showing Channel 4 News. The chyron at the bottom of the screen read in bold red letters, "Vampire King kidnaps mentally ill daughter of prominent family." On the screen, Arthur Sterling was sobbing. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. He was clutching a handkerchief, leaning heavily against Isla's stepmother Margot, who looked somber and devastated in a black dress she had likely bought just for this occasion. "We just want her back," Arthur wailed into the microphones thrust into his face. "My daughter, she isn't well. She has delusions. She requires medication. We trusted the medical facility to care for her, but instead, this beast, Lord Thorne, bought her like she was cattle. He took advantage of a sick girl." Standing next to them, looking like the picture of concerned nobility, was Baron Silas Vane. He spoke smoothly to the cameras, his voice dripping with false empathy. "As a member of the vampire aristocracy, I am appalled," Silas told the reporter. "Lord Thorne has broken the sacred covenant. He purchased a human who lacked the mental capacity to consent. It is not just a crime, it is a tragedy. I am financing the Sterling family's legal battle because it is the right thing to do." Isla shut off the TV, her hand trembling as she threw the remote onto the bed. "They are rewriting reality," she hissed. "My father sold me to pay off his gambling debts to the mob. He called me barren soil, and now I'm his beloved sick daughter because he smelled money." The intercom on the wall buzzed. It was Dr. Aris, his voice tight with urgency. "Kaelin, you need to come to the library now. The head of the Department of Human-Vampire Relations is at the gate. They have a warrant of reclaim. If we don't open the gates, they have the authority to use a battering ram." Kaelin's lips curled back, revealing his fangs. "Let them in." 10 minutes later, the grand foyer of Crimson Hollow was transformed into a battlefield. Kaelin stood at the base of the marble staircase, Isla at his side. He had dressed her in a gown of deep midnight velvet that highlighted her new status as the lady of the house, but she felt small against the sheer scale of the intrusion. The double doors groaned open. A team of 6 lawyers in grey suits marched in first, followed by a dour-looking official from the Department of Relations. Behind them came the family. Arthur Sterling walked in, his eyes darting around the opulent foyer, assessing the value of the paintings and the chandeliers. Greed briefly replaced the fake grief on his face before he spotted the cameras following them inside. He immediately slumped his shoulders, putting on the mask of the heartbroken father. "Isla!" he cried out, his voice cracking. "Oh, thank God! Look at you, you look so pale. Has he been feeding on you?" He rushed forward as if to hug her. "Stop!" Kaelin commanded. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. The single word carried a blast of kinetic energy that hit Arthur like a physical wall. The older man stumbled back, gasping. "Don't you dare touch her," Kaelin said, his voice dropping to a subsonic growl that made the glass in the windows vibrate. "You forfeited the right to call her your daughter the moment you signed the bill of sale." "I signed under duress," Arthur shouted, pointing a shaking finger at Kaelin for the benefit of the cameras. "I was confused. I thought I was signing admission papers for a clinic." Margot stepped forward, her eyes cold and calculating as they swept over Isla. She noticed the slight bump in Isla's belly immediately. Her eyes widened, and a cruel, triumphant smile played on her lips. "Isla, darling," Margot said, her voice dripping with poison disguised as honey, "you must come home. You aren't well. You know how you get when you don't have your tea." Isla flinched. The tea. The poison. "I'm not sick, Margot," Isla said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I was never sick. You were poisoning me, wolfsbane and nightshade. Dr. Aris found it in my blood." Silas Vane stepped out from the shadows, clapping his hands slowly. The sound echoed sharply in the silent hall. "A convenient diagnosis from the accused's own brother," Silas sneered, adjusting his silk tie. "How trustworthy. Tell me, Lord Thorn, did your brother also fabricate the medical records from the city clinic? The one stating, 'Miss Sterling has the cognitive development of a child'?" Silas snapped his fingers, and one of the lawyers stepped forward, handing a thick document to the department official. "This is an affidavit from Dr. Halloway," Silas announced, turning to the cameras. "It states that Isla Sterling suffers from hysterical delusion and reproductive failure syndrome. Clears throat. It declares her legally incompetent, a ward of the state. Therefore, she cannot be sold, she cannot marry, and she certainly cannot consent to breeding." Silas's eyes landed on Isla's stomach. If she is indeed pregnant, as rumors suggest, that is further proof of Lord Thorn's crime. He has impregnated a woman who is legally a child in the eyes of the court. The accusation hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Caelan moved so fast he was a blur. In a split second, he was inches from Silas's face, his hand wrapped around the vampire baron's throat. "I will rip your head off and mount it on these gates," Caelan snarled, lifting Silas off the ground effortlessly. "Do it," Silas wheezed, smiling through the choking grip. "Do it on camera, Caelan. Prove them right. Prove you are a monster. The High Council will execute you before sunset." "Caelan, no!" Isla screamed, grabbing his arm. "Let him go, please!" Caelan froze. He looked at Isla's terrified face. He looked at the red recording lights of the cameras. With a roar of frustration, he threw Silas backward. The Baron crashed into a table, shattering a priceless Ming vase. But he stood up, laughing, brushing the dust from his suit. "You have a temper, Your Highness," Silas mocked. The official from the Department of Relations stepped forward, looking nervous. He cleared his throat. "Lord Thorn, the paperwork appears to be in order. The warrant of reclaim overrides your purchase contract. Under Section 4, Paragraph 2 of the Species Act, any human deemed medically unfit for transaction must be returned to their next of kin." "She is not going anywhere," Caelan said, standing in front of Isla like a shield. "Then you are in violation of the law," the official said, his voice trembling. I am authorized to call the enforcers." Arthur Sterling stepped closer, emboldened by the official's words. "Come on, Isla. Don't make this harder. We'll take care of you and the baby. We'll make sure the baby is raised right in a proper home, not a dungeon." Isla looked at her father. She saw the calculation in his eyes. He didn't see a grandchild. He saw a payday. A royal hybrid baby was worth billions on the black market. If they took her back, they would likely keep her drugged in a basement until she gave birth, sell the baby to Silas Vane, and then dispose of her. The realization hit her like ice water. This wasn't a custody battle. It was an assassination attempt on her life and her child's future. "I won't go," Isla said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. "You have no choice, dear," Margot hissed. "I do," Isla said, stepping out from behind Caelan. She looked straight into the camera lens. "I demand a tribunal." Silence fell over the room. Even Silas looked surprised. "A tribunal?" the official asked, blinking. "Miss Sterling, that is an archaic request. Only a member of a royal house can demand a High Council tribunal." "I am carrying the heir to the Thorn bloodline," Isla declared, placing her hands on her stomach. "By the laws of the ancients, I am not just a human. I am the mother of a prince, and I demand the right to face my accusers in the Hall of Judgment." She turned to Silas. "You say I am incompetent. Fine. Put me on the stand. Let the high elders question me, unless you're afraid of what I might say." Silas's eyes narrowed. He hadn't expected the girl to have a spine. He looked at Arthur, who looked nervous, but Silas was arrogant. He had the forged medical records. He had the bribed judges. He had the money. "Very well," clear's throat Silas said, straightening his jacket. "If you want to be humiliated publicly before you are returned to the nursery, so be it. A tribunal tonight." The official nodded, stamping the warrant. "The hearing is set for midnight. Lord Thorne, Miss Sterling, you are summoned to the High Council. Get out of my house." Caelan whispered, the darkness in the room seeming to gather around him like a cloak. Arthur and Margot scrambled toward the door, eager to escape the suffocating aura of the angry king. Silas lingered for a moment, his gaze locking with Caelan's. "I'll see you at midnight, old friend," Silas murmured. "Kiss her goodbye while you can. By tomorrow morning she'll be back in her cage. And you'll be dust." The doors slammed shut, leaving the foyer in silence. Caelan turned to Isla, his face a mask of agony. He fell to his knees, burying his face in her stomach, his body shaking. "I failed you," he rasped. "I brought this storm to your door." Isla ran her fingers through his dark hair, feeling the fierce bond between them, pulsing stronger than ever. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp anger. "No, Caelan," she said softly, lifting his chin so he looked into her eyes. "You didn't fail me. You woke me up." She looked at the shattered vase where Silas had fallen. "They think they are fighting a scared little girl who can be bullied by her father," Isla said, her voice hardening into steel. "But they forgot one thing. I lived in that house for 20 years. I know where the skeletons are buried. And tonight I'm going to bring a shovel." Caelan stood up, towering over her, pride warring with his worry. He kissed her forehead, a promise of violence and devotion. "Then let us go to court, my queen," he said, "and let us show them what happens when they try to steal from the devil." The Hall of Judgment was not built for mercy. It was built to remind anyone who entered that the Vampire High Council had ruled for 10,000 years by crushing dissent. The chamber was a vast circular amphitheater carved entirely from black obsidian. There were no lights, only the eerie bioluminescent glow of the moss that grew in the crevices of the stone walls, casting long skeletal shadows across the floor. In the center of the room, a single circle of white light illuminated the accused and the accusers. Isla stood in that light, her hand gripping Caelan so tightly her knuckles were white. Across from them stood her father Arthur, his face slick with sweat, and her stepmother Margot, who was nervously twisting a diamond ring on her finger, a ring Isla knew they couldn't afford 2 days ago. Beside them stood Baron Silas Vane, looking bored, as if he were waiting for a tedious play to end. High above them on 3 floating stone thrones sat the elders. They did not look human. Their skin was translucent, their eyes entirely black, and their presence emitted a crushing pressure that made the air hard to breathe. "We are convened." The chief elder, a being known only as Valerius, spoke. His voice didn't come from his mouth, it echoed directly inside Isla's skull. "The charge is fraud, kidnapping and violation of the Species Act. Baron Vane, present your case." Silas stepped forward, bowing theatrically. "Elders," Silas began, his voice smooth as silk. "The facts are simple. Lord Caelan Thorne, a king who should know better, preyed upon a vulnerable human family. He purchased Isla Sterling, a woman documented to be mentally infirm and reproductively barren, for a sum of 50 million credits. When her loving father realized the mistake, that his daughter was being taken not to a care facility, but to a predator's bed, he tried to annul the sale. Lord Thorne refused and threatened violence. Silas gestured to a floating screen where the forged medical documents appeared. Exhibit Dr. Halloway's report, Diagnosis: hysterical delusion and grade 4 infertility. This woman belongs in a hospital, not a harem. We petition for immediate custody to be returned to Arthur Sterling, and for the fetus, a product of illegal exploitation, to be placed under the guardianship of the Vane estate. Arthur stepped up, squeezing out a few fresh tears. I just want my little girl back, Your Eminence. She doesn't know what she's saying. She thinks she's a queen. It's the sickness talking. Caelan growled, a sound so deep it vibrated the obsidian floor. He took a step forward, his eyes burning red. I will silence that lying tongue. Peace, Caelan, Valerius commanded, raising a hand. An invisible force slammed Caelan back into place. We have heard the accusation. Now let us hear the vessel. The elder looked at Isla. Step forward, human. Isla's legs felt like lead, but she forced herself to move. She stepped into the center of the circle alone. She looked up at the terrifying creatures who held her life in their hands. My name is Isla Thorne, she said, her voice shaking but gaining strength with every word. I have taken my mate's name, and I am not sick. I am not barren, and I am certainly not a victim of Caelan Thorne. The documents say otherwise, Valerius noted, gesturing to the floating screen. The documents are lies, purchased with the money my father made from selling me, Isla said, turning to look at Arthur. Tell them, Dad. Tell them about the tea. Arthur paled. I don't know what you mean. For 5 years, Isla continued, addressing the elders. My stepmother Margot brewed me a special herbal tea every night. She said it was for my nerves. She said it was vitamins, but after I drank it, I would feel foggy, weak, and my cycles stopped. She pointed to Dr. Aris, who stood in the shadows. Dr. Aris, please. Aris stepped forward, activating a holographic projector. A complex 3D image of a DNA helix appeared, pulsing with ugly green, jagged lines. We analyzed Lady Isla's hair follicles, Aris announced. The toxicology report is conclusive. High concentrations of wolfsbane and nightshade. These are not recreational drugs. They are hormonal suppressants used by poachers to mask the scent of rare creatures. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The elders leaned forward. To a vampire, poaching or damaging a breeding human was a crime worse than murder. It was a crime against the blood. Poison! Valerius hissed, his black eyes fixing on Margot. You poisoned a life-bringer! No, never! Margot shrieked, her composure cracking. She's lying. She did it herself. She's crazy. Remember, we also traced the purchase orders. Caelan's voice cut in, cold and sharp as a guillotine blade. He swiped his hand, and a new document appeared on the screen. Black market receipts, deliveries of wolfsbane to the Sterling Manor, signed for by Margot Sterling, dated every month for the last 5 years. The evidence was damning. Arthur looked like he was about to vomit. Margot was trembling, but Silas Vane laughed. How touching, Silas sneered. So the parents are abusive. That is regrettable, but it does not change the law. The girl was sold under false pretenses. The contract is void. The child she carries belongs to the Sterling estate by default, and since the Sterlings are clearly unfit, I offer to take the burden. I will raise the heir. Silas looked at the elders with a confident smirk. You cannot leave a royal hybrid with a rogue king who threatens the aristocracy. I am the safe choice. Isla felt a cold dread. Silas was maneuvering around the truth, using the law as a weapon. He didn't care about the poison. He just wanted the baby. There is one more thing, Isla said. Her voice quiet. She reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a small, crumpled piece of paper. It looked ancient, stained with grease. When I was 16, Isla said, I found this in my father's desk. I didn't understand what it was then. I thought it was a joke. She handed the paper to the court clerk, a silent wraith, who floated it up to Valerius. The chief elder read it. and for the first time his expression changed. His eyes widened. "What is this?" Valerius whispered. "It is a futures contract," Isla said, staring at Silas Vane. "Dated 6 years ago. It's an agreement between Arthur Sterling and Baron Silas Vane. In exchange for a loan to cover gambling debts, Arthur agreed to sell his firstborn daughter to Vane regarding breeding rights upon her 18th birthday. The room erupted in gasps. "You knew," Isla said, turning to Silas. "You knew I was a life-bringer 6 years ago. You had your scouts test me without my knowledge. You paid my father to poison me so no one else would smell my scent, so you could buy me cheap when the time came. But you got greedy. You let my father put me on the open market to drive up the price, thinking no one would bid on a barren girl but you." Kaelin stared at Silas, the realization hitting him. "You orchestrated the whole thing. You suppressed her power to steal a queen." Silas's smirk vanished. He looked at the contract in Valerius's hand, his face draining of color. That is a forgery. It carries your blood seal," Valerius boomed, his voice shaking the foundations of the hall. "The scent is unmistakable." The chief elder stood up, towering over the assembly. The shadows in the room grew teeth. "Baron Silas Vane, you have conspired to manipulate the royal bloodlines. You have poisoned a life-bringer. You have attempted to defraud the High Council. This is treason." Clear's throat. Valerius pointed a withered finger at Silas. "Seize him!" "No!" Silas screamed, his eyes turning black as he drew a hidden silver dagger. "I will not be judged by relics. The girl is mine." He lunged not at the guards, but at Isla. It happened in slow motion. Silas moved with elder speed, the dagger aiming for Isla's heart. Kaelin was fast, but he was on the other side of the circle. "Isla!" Kaelin roared, launching himself through the air, but Isla didn't flinch. As Silas leaped, something ancient woke up inside her. The sanguis vitae, the lifeblood, reacted to the threat against her unborn child. Isla screamed, and a wave of pure golden energy exploded from her body. It wasn't magic. It was the raw, protective power of a life-bringer. The shockwave hit Silas in mid-air. Crack! Silas was thrown backward as if hit by a cannonball. He smashed into the obsidian wall with a sickening crunch of bone, sliding down to the floor, broken and gasping. Silence fell over the hall. Kaelin landed in front of Isla, retracting his claws, looking at her with awe. She was glowing, her skin radiating a soft golden light. "She protected herself," Dr. Aris whispered in the silence. "The mother's wrath." Valerius looked down at the broken form of Silas Vane. "The judgment has been rendered by the blood itself." The elder turned his gaze to Arthur and Margot, who were cowering on the floor. "Arthur and Margot Sterling, you sold your own flesh and blood. You poisoned a queen. You are stripped of your names. You are stripped of your citizenship. You will be taken to the bleak lands. You will serve the rest of your mortal lives, feeding the starving. You will know hunger as you made her know pain." Guards dragged the screaming couple away. Arthur reached out for Isla one last time. "Isla, have mercy!" Isla watched him go, her hand resting on her stomach. "I have mercy," she said softly. "I'm letting you live." Valerius looked at Kaelin and Isla. "Lord Thorn, Lady Thorn, the Clear's throat marriage is recognized. The child is blessed. Go in peace." Kaelin swept Isla up into his arms, burying his face in her neck. He was trembling. "You saved yourself," he whispered. "You are magnificent." "We saved each other," Isla replied, resting her head on his shoulder as he carried her out of the darkness and into the night. The nursery at Crimson Hollow was unlike any other room in the fortress. It was filled with sunlight, soft, flowing curtains, and the scent of lavender. Isla sat in a rocking chair, humming a lullaby. In her arms lay Ethan, a baby with his father's raven hair and his mother's golden-flecked eyes. He was perfect, and he was strong. He had already broken 3 rattles with his tiny, powerful grip. Kaelin leaned against the doorframe, watching them. He had spent 500 years alone, convinced that he was a monster destined for solitude. Now his castle was filled with life. He walked over, kneeling beside the chair. He reached out a finger, and Ethan grabbed it, cooing softly. "He looks like you," Kaelin said, his voice soft with reverence. "He has your temper," Isla teased, kissing Kaelin's forehead, "and your appetite." Kaelin smiled, a true smile that reached his eyes. "The world knows us now, Isla. They call you the Golden Queen. The Sterlings are forgotten. Silas is gone. We won." Isla looked out the window at the ocean crashing Clear's throat against the cliffs. She thought about the girl she used to be, scared, hiding in a dusty room, believing she was broken. "They told me I was empty," she whispered, looking down at her son. "But they were wrong." Kaelin kissed her hand, his fangs grazing her skin in a gesture of eternal claim. "You were never empty, my love. You were just waiting for the right king to fill your world." Isla leaned back, closing her eyes as the sun warmed her face. She was home, she was loved, and for the first time in her life she was free. And that is the story of Isla and Kaelin, from being sold as damaged goods to becoming the most powerful mother in the vampire kingdom. Isla proved that your worth isn't defined by your family or a medical diagnosis. It's defined by the strength of your spirit. The Sterlings sold a diamond for the price of coal, and in the end, they paid the ultimate price for their greed. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of romance, betrayal, and sweet revenge, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. Did you think the punishment for her parents was fair, or should they have suffered more? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new story. I'll see you in the next video with another dark romance.